We're continuing on the sermon series that's entitled, "This Too is an Act of Worship." And that's the phrase that I often use when we do our offering. When we say, just a reminder, everybody, it's a reminder to me as well, that what we do in the offering, that this too is an act of worship. And when we oftentimes pray three things in this act of worship, that God would make us generous givers, sacrificial givers, and joyful givers. We're actually going to press pause before we get to that third word, joyful givers, okay? And we're going to come back around in case I lost some of you last week. Last week we talked about sacrificial giving. And I read a passage in Romans 12. And so part of the sermon today is about a further comment on this word sacrifice. That's one point. The second part of the sermon is how I preach this to myself. And so this is not just something for you, this is something for us. And so my joining you in this act of sacrifice. And then thirdly, we're going to learn about where does our money go. I'm just going to show you a practical, concrete picture of where our money goes. So if you give money to our offering, where is that going? And that's I think, going to be a third, final, helpful point, because it's not always really super clear. You give money to the plate on Sundays, and you're like, well, where does it go from there? So I think that's going to be helpful. In Romans 12, it says this, starting in verse 1, Romans 12, it says, "Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice." So there's the word, sacrifice. Offer your bodies as living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is true worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So if we look out to the world for our cues on what sacrificial living looks like, we're not going to get it, right? We look to the cross to understand what sacrificial living and giving looks like. So we pattern our lives after Christ, okay? Not taking our cues from this world. It says, so in verse 2 again, it says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will." So part of that will is us on the altar as a living sacrifice. That's God's will for us. And last week, I started off my sermon like this. And I said, I'm going to talk about a word that I wasn't really sure if I could put that in to our offering. And because it's a slippery word. You guys remember me saying this last week? I said it's a slippery word. It's a word that we water down. It's a word that we can make weak. We can soften it. We can lessen it. We can lose the force and the weight of it. And that word was sacrifice. And so I was really not sure if that's the word that we could be praying every Sunday for our offering. Make us generous, sacrificial, and joyful. Because it's far too slippery of a term, and our culture doesn't really grasp to be sacrificial. And so my concern is that we too did not hear the key word, the central word, the one word, the word that was last week's sermon, sacrifice. And I want to thank you all for those of you who stuck around for Christian Education and Fellowship last week. And I beg you, I ask you, please stick around as we discuss this today after church, because it's really important for me to hear how you're processing these things. And so I talked about sacrifice last Sunday, and then I listened to how you guys understood sacrifice during CEF last Sunday. And I heard some things, and I tweaked them a little bit. So I'm not saying this is what anybody said verbatim, but I want you to listen to some of these things, and I put myself at fault for the confusion, okay? I put myself at fault for the confusion here. And C, raise your hand when you hear the word sacrifice, okay? So if a person walks away and this says, and you're going to raise your hand when you hear what word? Okay. So no one has their hand. Well, Tom just raised it, right? But not yet. Wait, Nicholas. Hold on. Tom, I like that. I like the energy. All right. The message is, this is last week. The message is, what's one thing you can do to give more? Okay. Or the message is, what's a small thing you can do to give more? Or the message is, and all you have to do is give up one small thing. Or, I've gone far enough when, if I give the national average, which is actually 2.8% of giving, national average, people give 2.8%. And so I know I've gone far enough when I give another percent. So instead of my giving 2.8, what I took away from you last week, Pastor Nick, was not 2.8, but 3.8. Okay? Now, none of you said that, but this is what I fear some of you have latched onto. Or, I have met the main point, the main idea of what Pastor Nick said when he was talking about when instead of going out to eat and ordering a soda, I'm going to go with the water instead and throw in an extra $5 on Sundays. Okay, that's good. All right? But in fact, last week's sermon, I read even a list that seems to be comparable to the things that you just heard, all right? And so this is why I fault myself. And so last week I said, this is, in order for us to give more, we have to give up more, right? If you want to give more, you have to give some things up. And so here are some things you have to give some things up. Have you heard that word yet, just by the way? I don't see any hands raised yet. Huh? Hold up. I get there, all right? I like the energy. He's chomping at the bit. And so last week I said things like, maybe we could give up having a cheaper cell phone plan, or limiting the amount of money that we spend on technology, or opting for a slower internet speed, or going without internet, or giving up cable or TV or dish TV or satellite TV or Hulu or Netflix or things of that sort. And on the list went, and even bigger items. And maybe we should give up our boat or our camper or our RV or the campsite that we go to that we pay to rent, or the motorcycle or the snowmobile. And then I said, before we buy anything, let's pray. And pray daily that God would help you discern your wants from your needs. And do we really need to buy more clothes when we already have plenty of clothes? So I rattled off a list of brainstorming things to consider giving up in order to give more. But I never necessarily said that this constituted sacrifice. Now, it might. You just heard the word sacrifice. Some of you were slow. You just heard the word sacrifice. Good, right? I never necessarily said these constituted sacrifice. Now, they might for you. You heard it? Okay, now you can just stop, okay, on the sacrifice. You win. You're good. You win, all right? Game over. You won. Point. Me 0, okay? Nicholas, I like the energy. These things might not necessarily constitute sacrifice for you, but they may. And if it does for you, that's good. And you should start, if that's where your starting point is, okay, start there. But let's not stop there. Because sacrifice for me, I look to Christ on the cross, and I see far more than, Nick, 5 more bucks in the plate. Or, Nick, what's one thing? Or a small thing. To me, sacrifice is it's a big thing. It's a big thing. And so when Christ calls Nick, come follow me, he says, all these things that you just listed are fair game. And Nick, you might not just be picking one to get to what I mean by sacrifice. You might have to pick several, either small cuts or major gouges out of your spending habits, Nick. And then you're honoring me by this word sacrifice, Nick. And Judy's got the hand raised. You heard the word sacrifice. That's good. That's good. At the end of last week, after the sermon, before I do my little jig up here before I make the benediction sometimes, and a person was like, I'm going to go buy a cell phone after church, and I didn't want to have them in this sort of angst position of, should I go and get a new cell phone, or is this something I'm supposed to sacrifice? And if the person asked me, should I get the cell phone or not, I responded with what? I said, I don't know. And then I said the word, right? I said, I don't know what sacrifice means for you in your life. Okay? I didn't say one thing, a small thing. I used that word, that weighty, meaty, powerful word, slippery word, sacrifice. Okay? So this is my comment on sacrifice, all right? Phase 2 of the sermon, I'm in this with you, okay? I don't know where I'm at on this matter of obedience or disobedience on sacrifice. It's in here, okay. And so I'll put this in the plate. My wife's not here, she's at home not feeling well today. But Jessica and I give, and you need to know that I'm in this with you, all right? So if I preach these hard things about sacrifice, you need to know that your pastor's just not taking the offering, running home, and hoarding it, being greedy, right? Jessica and I give more every month, throughout all of our giving to God, more every month than what we pay for our house. And for some of you, that's a no surprise, and perhaps you as well, give more away to see God's kingdom advanced than you pay for your house. Okay? And so, because this, I would stop short of sacrifice that God calls me to if I would say, well, I give more to God every month than I pay for the movies, or that I pay when I go out to restaurants, or that I pay for my grocery bill. What God tells me, Nick, you're disobeying me on this word of sacrifice. And so Jessica and I want to apply what I preach, obviously, and that word is sacrifice. And so besides what we give to the offering plate, and so in the offering plate, you know, every week, your offering plate might include budget, general budget. Your offering plate might include United Missions. Your offering plate might include one of Rosemary's special mission moments that she mentions up here, usually on a monthly basis, though not always. Next month, for instance, we have Samaritan's Purse shoeboxes thing. Is Rosemary here today? Okay. We're doing Samaritan's shoeboxes next month, as well as the World Mission Offering. Okay. Besides some of those things Jessica and I give in different incremental measures, we support 3 other ministries outside of the walls of this church. And so what Jessica and I give to is to be disciples who treasure Christ, who seek to make disciples for Christ. So if that just sounded familiar to you right now, it should, because I say that absolutely every single week. And so Jessica and I give to our mission statement. We are disciples who treasure Christ and seek to make disciples for Christ. That's what we give to, whether it's inside these walls, the special offerings, or the 3 ministries that we support outside of this church. Okay? That's where the money goes to. Our money goes to being disciples for the purpose of making disciples. Imagine somebody asking these 2 questions in church. First, how much money did you make last year? And second, how did you spend it? That's pretty taboo, right? How much did you make and how did you spend it? Well, I just told you, Jessica and I give more away than what we pay for our house. In case some of you think that I'm talking about this series on offering, which deals with more than money, but certainly includes money as well, in case you think, because you distrust pastors, the only people distrust more, I think, more than used car salesmen, right? Who do people distrust more than used car salesmen, right? Like lawyers and pastors, right? That's a small joke. And so you perhaps listen to the sermon series from a place of distrust pastors because you might think whenever pastors talk about money, they just want to make more. Let me try to put that distrust to rest. Or you're cynical about the institutional church. You're just skeptical, right? You distrust, you're cynical, you're skeptical. And so you'll have to see, is my talking about money by my history of how much I make and how you know how much I give right now, is this because I want to make more, okay? So after college, with a college degree, the first job I had in Christian ministry, I made $1,000 a month. And this was in 2004, all right? This is not back in 1970. This is 2004. I made $1,000 a month. And you might say, well, that's $12,000 a year, Nick. What's the poverty level? Okay? My first job after graduate school, $1,500 a month. $18,000 a year. You have to say, well, is Nick just talking about money because look at how greedy he is going after the high-paying jobs in the ministry world. My next job after that was significantly more. And then I came here, and I took a 17% pay cut. Okay? Because I'm about the mission. I'm not about the money. And so Jessica and I can live off this much, and whatever you try to do with the budget, we can still, guess what, live off of this much. So if we can live off of this much, and the budget increases, then it means we can give more, right? And so, in my mind, a person is entrusted with God's money. It's God's money. And so if we can live off of this much, and you get more, that doesn't mean your standard of living increases. Our standard of giving would increase. That's what Jessica and I believe. And if that sounds biblical, that sounds right, that sounds what honors God, then I, like Paul say, follow me. Imitate me. If you say that $1,000 seems too much, and I'm still distrusting, skeptical, and suspicious, and that 17% pay, whatever, then don't give here. If you hate the institutional church, do it elsewhere. But if you're on board with God's mission and you still believe that there's a purpose for Whiting Community Baptist Church, and this church gives you spiritual food, then pay for that spiritual food. Just as I said last week, you go out to a restaurant, right? You go out to Culver's down the street, you go out to Culver's, you eat the food at Culver's, and who do you pay for the food who do you pay for the food you eat, right? You pay Culver's. You ate Culver's food and you pay Culver's. If this church is giving you spiritual nourishment, you pay for the spiritual nourishment. Okay? You can go above and beyond that, but yet there is some sort of correlation there. And so if you're getting spiritually fed here, I would expect, unless you can tell me why my logic is so far off base, that there would be a portion that you would give here. Let me say this piece about giving inside these four walls or giving outside. This comes from a book called Contagious Generosity. On page 47, it says, if we are instructing our people about stewardship and we see that their money is going elsewhere and not just the church, is that okay? Okay? I just told you that Jessica and I give, and some of what we give is out to 3 other ministries, okay? And so is that okay, what I'm doing, is that okay if you do it not just to the church? And the answer is yes. Okay, back to the quote. The answer is yes. Then we are approaching this as discipleship and teaching. If seeing the money go elsewhere isn't okay, then really all we're doing is just fundraising. The conclusion we came to is that we want congregational giving to go across the board, not just to the church, but to other organizations as well. And I would add that are good, godly, gospel-spreading missions. Right? We want to see other totals go up. Then we know we are doing our job as church leaders. So if you believe in the mission, as Jessica and I believe in the mission, you believe that it's important to treasure Christ, exalt Christ, spread Christ to everybody in the Fox cities, give to our mission. If you would say, Nick, you seem to mismanage your personal money, go and give elsewhere, because whatever Jessica and I do in our home, I'm going to influence the people making the budget that you're going to vote on in a few months, right? And so if I have, I'm a selfish wreck in how I spend my money, be careful if you give here, because I'm going to bring my selfish wreck and how I manage money at home into what I'm going to try to persuade the people making the budget. But if you're persuaded I'm trying to honor God at home, then people who are making the budget, I'm going to try to persuade them increasingly more so as I gain more and more power in this church to use them for our mission. Right? Mark chapter 10. I invite you to open up there with me. I'll be reading from the NIV. Mark 10, verses 17 through 29. Mark 10, 17 through 29. I probably won't get through all the verses, but I'm going to get a jump start on them. Verse 21 is the focal point. This is the story of the rich young ruler. The rich young ruler is the story given in all 3 of the synoptic gospels. I never heard of that word before. What do you mean by the Gospels? I know there are 4 Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The 3 synoptic Gospels are the first 3: Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Okay? Matthew and Luke, as they give this story, they leave out the first part of verse 21. So I want us to look at Mark 10 and look at this little phrase in verse 21 that says, and Jesus looked at him, which is the rich young ruler. Jesus looked at this rich young ruler and loved him. Well, Luke doesn't have it. Matthew doesn't have it. Only Mark's got it. What do you mean? What happened next? Catch this. Jesus is talking to this rich young ruler, and everything that just happens to be verse 21, Jesus says, how are you doing in following me in this area? How are you doing in following me in this area? How about that area? This area over here, that area over there. And this rich young ruler says, got it, knocked it out of the park. And I could only very well imagine in this context that all these laws that Jesus is saying, well, what about this law? What about this law? What about that law? One of those laws, how are you doing, is not mentioned here, so this is a bit imaginative on my part, but I think it's here, right? I think it's in the background text, is this idea that he's also knocking it out of the park in terms of tithing, which in that context would be 10%. Where he's not knocking it out of the park in terms of almsgiving, giving to the poor. Right? But that's not there. There's a bit imaginative leap, but that's what I think is happening. Right? The poor thing is there, but the 10% is not. So I would agree at this point what a book called The Tithing Dilemma and the Triumph of Love writes on page 69. It says, as the rich young ruler followed the law to the letter, right? How are you doing in this area of the law? How are you doing in that area of the law? Rich young ruler says, got it. I got this, Jesus. There's this one thing that I still lack. What is it? But all this law, I got. Follow the letter of law to the T. Do you think that such a person who knew the law like this rich young ruler did could leave out tithe on his list? And I agree with what the author says here. It says, I doubt it. I doubt it. So I think this rich young ruler is probably tithing. I don't know for sure, but I probably think so. To think otherwise is like, I doubt it, okay? Catch this. Jesus goes, or the guy goes, teacher, all of these laws, verse 20, all of these laws I have kept since I was a boy. I want that guy in church. Do you want that guy in church? I do. This was a good guy by the world standards. If that guy came to your church, man, the things that he could do. He could be the mover and shaker on the boards. Right? All of these things I have kept since I was a boy. And Jesus looked at him and loved him and said this, one thing you lack. Go, sell everything you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me. Jesus looked at him and loved him and said some of the scariest, most serious words. He says these words to this rich young ruler. This is the only place in the Bible that I can ever see God asking anybody to go to this extreme. So I think what he's doing is he's going to the extreme like he would when he's talking about to the alcoholic, you can't drink anymore. You have to go to that extreme because money has such a grip, money is such an idol in this rich young ruler's life, you have to give it all up. Give it all away. So this instruction is isolated, okay? I don't think this would be to all people, in all places, at all times. Okay? This is the only example we can see anywhere in Scripture where God gives this kind of extreme instructions. Because I think what money has done to this rich young ruler is what alcohol would do to an alcoholic. So you just got to put it away. You just can't deal with it anymore. Okay? Then come follow me. Verse 22, at this, the man's face fell. He went away sad because he had great wealth. All right, so catch this. Jesus looked at him and loved him. You got to give up everything you got. Come follow me. Face down. Went away sad. This goes away like this. And if Jesus had a church that day, okay, this is what happened. Jesus looked at him and loved him. Jesus was truly loving this man, truly loving him, right? And at the end, true love looked like this. Face to the ground, walks away sad. If you want to be part of following Jesus, if you wanted to be part of his church in his time, you couldn't hang on to your idols. This rich young ruler, hearing this, walked away sad. In our context, I would argue this might be the equivalent. Rich young ruler, a good amount of salary today would be $200K. If you're making $200,000, you're making good bank, right? And it seems to me, from what I can tell, this rich young ruler, in our context, the equivalent would be $2,000 every year. And if what I think is true about what he did with the law and what he did with tithing, $200,000 at 10% giving to his church, that he hit the letter of the law out of the ballpark. He nailed it, Jesus. $200,000, 10%, that's $20,000. Our budget is about $90,000 this year, right? When he goes away sad, you just lost 20 to 23% of your giving. Just walked out your door, right? 20 to 23%, this rich young man contributing by tithe, purely by tithe, 10%, just walked out your door. Jesus didn't chase him. Jesus did not chase him. And if you leave because you see idols in your life, and you hear, just like this rich young ruler, you hear Jesus, right? But you hear me say something, and it's not just from me, it's from God, and you go away sad, I don't chase you. I don't care if you're a 2% giver to our budget, a 5% or a 10%. I don't chase you. Can you imagine, in this context, that next budget meeting for Jesus? Well, Jesus, we lost 20+% of our budget, so Jesus, you're now part-time pastor. I mean, is that too much of an exaggeration? Am I just pulling your leg at this point? Because you just lost 20+% of your giving, so now you just went Pastor Jesus just got demoted to part-time. Can you believe that? It could happen. And guess what? Jesus keeps preaching this way. Guess what's going to happen 2 or 3 years from now? Jesus on the cross. Jesus loses his job and gets crucified because he talked about sacrifice. You don't want to listen about sacrifice? Look at this sacrifice. Go part-time to no time to crucifixion. It took Jesus a couple years. I hope that you will see in a much smaller way, in some hope of some sort of purity sense, that you can see that I pray that I can be like Jesus in verse 21. That's my prayer. Jesus looked at him and loved him. That you'll know that I look at you and I love you. Okay? And my loving you will not be watering down this word sacrifice, or softening it, or weakening it, or anything of that sort. That word sacrifice means sacrifice. I told you what it means for Jessica and myself. Okay? I'm not saying that's you. Okay? But deal honestly with that word before God. What sacrificial giving looks like. The good news is the Packers don't play at noon. They don't play until tomorrow night, so we have plenty of time. So we're on to the last point of the sermon today. And that last point is about, where does your giving go? Okay, you feel some sense that there's some sort of emotion within you right now, and yes, we want to give sacrificially, but if we give here, Pastor Nick, where does your giving go? We give with the end goal as mission. That's what we do here at Wedding Church. We give with the end goal as mission, not meeting the budget. It just so happens that along the way, in meeting our mission goals, we happen to hit our budget targets. See, our vision is way down here, right? Way down here, although we put our money in way over here. So it's like, Kathy here today? Kathy Strohmeyer? Yeah, right? You have some relatives that live in Milwaukee, right? Right, and their names are Mike and Heidi, right? The kids and grandkids. Wonderful. So imagine this. I hear George and Kathy go and visit Mike and Heidi and the grandkids down in Milwaukee. And I say, tell me all about Fond du Lac. I heard you went to visit Mike and Heidi this week. Tell me all about, because perhaps you go through Fond du Lac on the way down? You could pass, right, you go past it. And so if I'm saying, tell me all about Fond du Lac, they say, Nick, you're missing the point. We go through Fond du Lac to get to see Mike and Heidi. The end time goal is not to say, we made budget this year, hooray, yippee. I mean, I'd do a little happy dance, but that's not the end time, right? It is not the ultimate end of time, before the Lord, book of Revelation, happy dance. Living on mission is. And so their goal when they go visit Mike and Heidi is to have a good quality time with Mike and Heidi, right? And if I'm talking about, well, how was Fond du Lac, or how was the Milwaukee Zoo, and how were the monkeys, and how were the giraffes? Well, we didn't go to the zoo, and we just went past Fond du Lac. You're missing the point, Nick. The point was them to build relationships with their family. Not all these other things along the way. My goal is not to keep these church doors open. My goal is to live on mission. And if God is so pleased as we live on mission to keep the church doors open, praise God. But it doesn't have to be so. All right, so I just want to be upfront. I'm not here so you can make budget. Right? And the rich young ruler can walk away. I don't care. Right? We're here to live on mission. Our budget goes towards that mission. Let me take this a step further. If I don't see that the money that goes into the plate, if we just say it goes into utilities or building maintenance, and I don't see the end time goal is mission, and then this part is for you. Okay? Listen tight. I give to see lives changed. Okay? I give for our mission, right? It just happens to go through the budget, which I hope we meet, right? I give to mission. It happens to go through the budget to get there, but I give to mission. If I don't see mission, but I only see budget, I become jagged. If I don't see mission, I only see budget, I become jagged. And I say, well, that's just about Henry making sure he has money to pay the church's winter heating bill. It just so happens that it goes through the budget structure to get to mission. That's what I'm arguing. Amber and Brett are going to join me up here. They didn't know they were doing this, so give them a round, huh? Amber and Brett. You did not know that part of what you give is doing the work of God at UW Fox Valley. Look at these chairs that they have, huh? Look at this. Please. Sir, madam, right? So it's hard because what you give here on Sunday morning goes to mission. It happens to go through budget to get to mission, ultimately gets to mission. And it goes from here to 8 miles that way, UW Fox Valley, right? 8 miles-ish? 12-minute drive? 12-minute drive, right? So what we do here, giving on mission, we are disciples who treasure Christ and seek to make disciples for Christ, right? We're all about being disciples, treasuring God, modeling that, and to see other people come to Christ. And so I asked Amber and Brett on Thursday night, uninvited, to show up at their house. That's what I do. I say, tell me how God's using you on your campus. Tell me how God's using you on your campus. And you're going to hear about what you give here on a Sunday, how it's making a missional difference on their campus midweek, okay? Who's going first? Brett's going first. That's what I asked on Thursday, right? How do you think that God's using you on your campus? Just say exactly what you said Thursday night. It was brilliant. The social thing, right? You're making friends. You got some classmates, you know. Unless that was a lie on Thursday night. No, it was legit. All right, take it away.
Okay, so obviously one thing you probably know the way I am, and it's kind of the same way I could ball. So the way I interact with people, I don't want to say attack. I try to socialize the shy people.
Attack the shy people.
It's, like people in my classroom, they sit in the back, they don't interact much. And, I try to reach out and say, hey, get involved with school, get involved with crew, come check it out, try to be outgoing and try to other people that way.
Right, and there's a couple guys in your classes, right? Yeah. Thanks, Brett. So you might not realize this, but I kind of have to put my emotions in check sometimes. I get passionate, I get worked up. And so people who are scared off by me, Brett knows how to tackle people in a different, not tackle, how to relate to people in a different way. Social interaction, right? So he's got social skills because nerdy Nick could never reach the people that Brett could reach. And so God is using Brett on his campus, in his campus ministry, to let the shy people feel more comfortable so the shy people can fit in, right? And in fact, your sister told me that they've walked out to their car at times, and true or not true, right? And people are like, hey, Brett, like all the time, right? And so all these people know Brett on campus. And so Brett is a social influencer on campus, right? He's a change agent for God on his campus. So know that, this is Brett's church right here, right? And so you're giving on Sunday. You're pouring into his discipleship here. He's then using that in his skill set and on the campus. Over to you.
Well, what I said, I'm a leader on our Christian club on campus, and as a leader, I lead weekly Bible studies for the women, and so that then I also have disciple opportunities with meeting of those girls.
Excellent. Thank you. Give them a round, huh? You got a seat. And as we take time to hear stories about how you guys are going out and advancing God's kingdom elsewhere, you would never have known what you give on a Sunday is impacting people at UW Fox Valley midweek. Right. And Brett, you're the treasurer there this year, and Amber is the secretary. Right. So on top of Brett, what he's doing socially, reaching out to the shy people. Amber, what she's doing, one-on-one discipleships in small groups, right? These other hats that they wear as well. And so I want you to catch a bigger vision, right? It's not, we're not getting aesthetic so we can give to the budget so that he can be paid. We give so that lost souls can be saved. We give so that Brett and Amber can be equipped with the gospel and so they can share that gospel on their campus. See, our mission statement, we are disciples who treasure Christ and seek to make disciples for Christ, goes well outside of these walls. It goes on UW Fox Valley campus, whether you personally have or have not ever stepped foot on that particular campus yourself. In conclusion, for some time we had Vacation Bible School here. This last year we had what was called Families Connecting with the Lord, or FCL. We can have this program or that program and think delusionally because we have certain programs we're successful. No, that doesn't make us successful. Being true to our mission statement makes us successful. So to the ends that our budget and that our programs go towards living on mission, we are a success. We're not successful if we make budget. No, rather we're successful when this happens. When the lost are found, when those who are shackled in sin find freedom from sin, when baby Christians are raised towards maturity, when you see followers of Jesus make new commitments to go deeper in their faith, when you observe mature Christians growing in the application and discipline of their faith, go out and make disciples, then you are successful. I only care what we put in annual reports that ultimately I can trace back to logically progression of thought to our mission. Okay? That's what counts. Because when I stand before God, it's not, Nick, did you make your mission target your budget target? Because if you did, good job, you made budget. Right? This offering, not about budget. If you caught that, you didn't catch anything else, catch that. This offering not about budget. It's about mission and worship. Because God's not going to say, did you make budget? Your church make budget, Nick? No, he's going to say, Nick, did your church live on mission? And if not, what in the world were you doing, Nick? What were you doing if they weren't living on mission? And so if there's lukewarmness in this church, at some level, I'm held accountable because I'm helping keep this lukewarm environment. I would invite you to join me in prayer. Father, the national average is 2.8%. And Father, it gives me sleepless nights and early mornings and headaches and a whole bunch of stuff as I think about what our church gives. How, I don't know what even some people are doing in this church. And Father, I fear that our brothers and sisters who are persecuted around the world, that Chinese brothers and sisters in Christ will look at our budget and they would say, well, Nick, that's a fantastic outreach you do every Sunday because you got maybe 10 to 15 Christians, right? And then you got 40 to 50 non-believers because that's what your giving looks like. And so, Father, I think that would just be an absolute horrible indictment to see how some people here rob you of thousands of dollars. And our giving does not show that we're Christians at all. And so, Father, I pray that we don't water down this word sacrifice. I pray that we could see that we go through budget to get to mission, and we hit budget targets, but ultimately mission is the goal. And finally, Father, I pray that this congregation would know that when I look at them, I love them. And if they go home sad or say the sermon is too long or whatever, so be it. But they would hear the true gospel. Because, Father, I know whether it's a few days or a couple of decades or maybe even 60 years at best, one day I'll be before you, and it's not 40K that is gonna get me on that judgment day. It's not being true to the gospel. So, Father, I pray for these souls in a culture that in a culture that's coddled by pastors who would say that's okay, just give one more percent, Christ says give sacrificially. And I don't know what that means, what they're going to go home and do. But I pray that as I open up and I share a little bit more with what I make and what Jessica and I give, Father, that that people could actually open up and be honest about how they steal from you and how they give not the first or the best, but they give leftovers. They give what would be the Old Testament equivalent of a deformed goat with 2 legs left, diseased, and saying, God, take this deformed goat as my sacrifice. And that's God just gets the damaged goat. And so, Father, you call us to be giving first fruits, to give the first and the best. We lack discipline, really bad discipline in our culture. We are a greedy, covetous, jealous culture, jealous of our neighbor's possessions, and skeptical whenever we see generosity. I pray, Father, that you would bring some people back next Sunday, but they would do serious work before you, before that point. We're in trouble here, God, and it's not about closing the doors because we're fine with budget, but we're in trouble because we dishonor you with our mission, and we dishonor you with our lives, and we're not generous or sacrificial or joyful the way I see our budget breaking down with how I look at givers. And so, God, we really need your help. And Father, I pray that if people haven't had conversations with their spouses, we've prayed for months, holding spouses' hands, Father, saying, God, make us on the same page in terms of our finances. And so, Father, if they haven't even prayed with their spouse yet, I don't know what they're waiting for. And so, Father, I pray that spouses would pray this week, joining hands and saying, God, we need to be on the same page together in our marriage, and so that people in marriages together would be generous, sacrificial, and joyful. Father, I thank you for the kindness that these people give me each and every Sunday. They give me a good chunk of their time. I thank you for that. I pray, Lord, that they would be softened as they read what your word has this week on Scripture on this topic. Amen.